Welcome to the session on who's setting the agenda. Will there be a bottom-up process post-Covid-19 recovery? I have with me very eminent people who are in their own field and from both Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangalore, to be more specific. So I have with me the first speaker, Karin Fernando, and then I have Ahad Nazir. I'll introduce them. Then I have Anand Lobo. These are our three speakers. Anand is going to be more from the community, who will share some of the work that we as an organization do in the community. So broadly, the discussion will focus on what are the types of solutions, what is it based on, what is the role of the Southern think tanks. This is a very difficult agenda we've set for ourselves, but I'm sure that Karin, Ahad, and Anand will be able to throw some light or some sort of a solution for this. So the format is like this. I will introduce Karin first, her organization, and then ask her a couple of questions. Then I move on to Ahad, and then I move on to Anand. I head the policy engagement and communication at the Public Affairs Center, a think tank based in Bengaluru. We primarily focus on three important things. One, we focus all our activities on, our strategy was on 5 of the key SDG goals. As far as we are concerned, we feel they are key. We do action research. We use data analytics to support our action research. And we also conduct training and policy engagement to ensure sustainability. Coincidentally, I also head the Public Affairs Foundation, which is a sister concern of Public Affairs Center. That's about me, and we work largely with the community. And that is why we decided we'll bring in the community angle to the research work that we do. My first speaker for this afternoon, I say afternoon because in the South, it's now afternoon in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and in India, is Karin Fernando. She's a senior research professional at the Center for Poverty Analysis, CEPA, Sri Lanka, where she leads the work on sustainable development. She is part of the advisory group of the Asia Pacific Regional CSO Management Mechanism, a civil society platform aimed to enable stronger coordination and ensure that voices of all sub-regions of Asia Pacific are heard in intergovernmental processes in regional and global level in relation to the SDGs. She's also part of the steering committee of the Southern Voice Network, a network that think tanks aiming to push for Southern research and perspectives. Briefly, the Center for Poverty Analysis is an independent Sri Lankan think tank. It was established in 2001. It believes that poverty is an injustice and should be overcome, and that overcoming poverty involves changing policies. Now, I will start with asking Karin a couple of questions. Karin, welcome to the show or to the talk. The first question to you is, please share key aspects of poverty and inequality in South Asia by looking at it from a multidimensional lens.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for having me on this session. I think I can't go into all the different dimensions. Maybe I'll just focus on a few that have really changed because of what has happened with COVID. I think the most compelling, unfortunately, is the incredible, I mean, this is a prediction, and we don't really know if this is going to hold true, but the World Bank actually estimates that the increase in poverty numbers for this region is actually pretty daunting. So the people below $1.9 a day, which is really extreme poverty, and its income-based poverty is going to be about over 60%, and even people who are going to be over $3.2 a day, which is not a high estimate, is going to be about 70%, which really means that so many of the gains that have been made in this region, which was actually one of the fast-growing regions, if you look at the economic prosperity, is seeing a serious negative turn, and that really is quite scary. The kinds of jobs that are being lost, 18 million full-time jobs is what the ILO is estimating, and this is really, when you think of income inequality, we also know that then the vulnerabilities are going to increase amongst groups of women. The youth are particularly vulnerable because they are in that phase of moving from education into jobs, and when there are less jobs, there is then that chunk of youth unemployment becomes seriously problematic. We also know that in this region, migrant work is very important. They literally hold up our economies. We know how much we rely on remittances, and we also know how badly migrant work, both internal and people going out of the country, was affected, and we have seen the consequences of so many migrants actually moving out of cities into again back into rural spaces, or the trouble that migrant workers faced trying to get back in the country. So one kind of multidimensional aspect in this was that the kinds of rights and democratic issues also that migrant workers faced, in terms of not being able to get the kind of protection that should have been theirs, even if they were internal migrants or if they were external migrants. The other two dimensions really that were kind of shaken was in health. This was a health pandemic, but in the complete focus on trying to manage the COVID situation, there was also a neglect of other types of health issues. And this also can have serious impacts on other long-term management of healthcare. And again, this then means that poorer communities who rely on public healthcare systems, which are not well resourced, are going to bear the brunt of it. In education, I think Anand will probably be able to enlighten us much more from a more grounded sense. I mean, the inequalities of trying to give digital education in a place where there was already problems of quantity and quality in servicing education needs, I think was one of the biggest problems. With those two indicators, actually, there is a lot of qualitative evidence that shows what the disparities are, and these are probably going to be exacerbated because COVID is also not a one-time shock, it's a long-term shock. And this is one of the big challenges of dealing with a situation like this. I'll stop there and we can add more to the conversation as we go along.
Right. Okay, Karin, thanks for that. My next question to you is, in your opinion and based on your experiences, are there any specific recommendations that you would like to make?
Okay, so this is not, an easy fix, but definitely the call right now, the rallying call is really to really up the game on social protection. This is not a new call, this has always been there, but I think the onus to really move with this, because we have also seen the consequences of not having enough social protection. So our region also really is a region that is very low on covering people, also because most people are informal workers. So if you're 70% informal, then the amount of protection you have is also limited. Then we are also seeing the amount of money spent on dole-out packages, and that these packages really don't reach people who need them. And what about the people who are just above these lines that don't qualify, that then keep falling back? So the need to really have better social protection, targeted social protection, if need be, if universal protection is not there, is really a need of the hour. And again, things that protect migrant workers beyond just looking at income. and protection for work, but ensuring that they can also access services like health and the local government. Because most of the time, because they don't live in the area that they're registered, they don't get access to those services, which then is a problem, which is also what most of them faced in the situation. Even if you're not registered in that area, you can't get a vaccine in that area. So those kinds of things really impede getting the kind of services that you need. So social protection is, I think, one area that really needs greater focus, managing migrant workers, and also really thinking of employment options for women, because this is also one of the areas that greatly suffered. We know women's employment was lower. More women also lost jobs and had to increase not only care responsibilities, but also had to take over becoming teachers in their homes. But there now has to be a way of also focusing more on how to give women better ways of being employed. And I think this is also where we have learned the lessons of more flexible work hours. I mean, I think before the pandemic, how many people would have thought more creatively about flexible working hours, working from home? Can you work without traveling? And now most of us, I know there are plenty of jobs that you can't do in this way, but now more creative options for women for work is also an area that really needs to be looked into. So, I mean, it's plenty more options,
I guess.
I'm going to
come back to you again. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm going to come back to you with another question after I speak to. Welcome, Ahad, to this event. I know I'm meeting you. I mean, we met about 2 days back. So Ahad from Pakistan, which is Center for, from Ahad is heading at the SDPI, a private sector engagement. He represents Sustainable Institute. It began sometime in 1992. Ahad brings in more than 10 years of experience of the corporate sector and around 4 years of working in SDPI. Advocate of business-friendly policies in Pakistan and has worked on several evidence-based reform initiatives on the subject of tax, investment, energy, and entrepreneurship. He also acts as the secretary of the National Network for Economic. The first question I have for you is just connected. Yeah. How is the post-pandemic recovery looking like in South Asia? Apart from the revival of economic growth and job creation, what would be some of the other key priorities of governments in South Asia?
So thank you, and I thank all the panelists around. This has been a very, very good interaction, especially the ones coming from Karin help a lot in actually answering my own questions. So just having a look from Pakistan's perspective, and of course you can then decide whether the same answers hold for Sri Lanka and in India as a whole as well. So number one is that health expenditures increased. This is probably something, health was never a priority for at least the Pakistani government, and this has become a priority. Education has really suffered during the last year or so, while most of the schools that cater for the upper middle and the upper class, they have had the opportunity to shift towards online education, but most of the population of Pakistan has not been able to go to actually adopt to the online mode. Then going further, I think one thing that the government did not do well in was the communication part. So a lot of miscommunication and a lot of things that should not have gone out in public went out, and of course social media also has to do with it. But most of the people are not aware truly about the COVID as a whole and the effects of COVID, which are more important. So I recently had a chance to go to some of the areas of the Sindh province of Pakistan, and most of the people think that there is no COVID-19 still. So we have had so many people dying, and so many people that we have seen in front of our eyes that have gone really from being very well to almost very unwell. This basically leads to the kind of awareness that should have been given to to the public at large. Another thing that Pakistan suffers, it is my assumption that most of the countries in South Asia suffer as well, is the inconsistency of policy. So, and this is probably something that has affected the business community a lot. We have had inconsistency in terms of the finance incentive schemes, and of course in in lockdowns, the business does not know whether they will be working in the next week, or they will not be working. Uh, but of course there were opportunities as well, and I think this is where we need to tap in. I think India is of course much ahead of Pakistan, at least with regards to the tech sector. But e-commerce is something that is need of the hour. But unfortunately, again, most of the big corporations in Pakistan were already having their e-commerce stores even before the pandemic. And the small businesses, they of course have adopted to a bit, but they still suffer when it comes to e-commerce. So these are probably some of the things that the government should now look at going forward. And I'll be happy to answer any further questions if there are any. So I think talking about inequality, one of the major challenges that of course are coming in the future, and we are currently going through it, is the vaccination. So vaccination may lead to several forms of inequalities that at least Pakistan has not previously encountered. So looking at I think there was a need for a better community engagement. If we want to really go for the root cause analysis, I think the root cause was in the awareness. Had the awareness been there, then the government and the private and of course the community both would have worked in a better way. But of course the awareness only reached to a certain segment of the society, and that has caused inequality in education, in health. So just I've already talked about education, that only a handful of schools have the online facility operational. While for instance, my own child is ready to go to school. He's almost 2.5 years old, but I cannot send him to an online facility, because I think it is almost impossible for a child of that age to be catered online. And then I would like to talk about the financial incentive schemes and the economic stimulus that was introduced as a result of COVID-19. And even that although intentionally the government did not focus it on the upper class, but the most of the beneficiaries, and this is of course some of the comments that came through in our public-private dialogues, that most of the beneficiaries are from the upper class, or the large corporations got benefited instead of the small businesses, because majorly because of the capacity issues of the small businesses. So small businesses were not as much aware of these schemes as the large corporations were, and as a result, they were able to get hold of those incentives more than the small businesses, which of course these schemes were actually intended for. So I think if I'll sum it up, I think the government needs to engage more with and they need to engage more. They need to hear from the horse's mouth more, that what type of challenges actually are at the ground level. And once they know that, then they can design any kind of stimulus, whether they can go for better health services, they can go for better education services, because this is something that is here to stay. I don't think that this is just a phenomena that will end. I think this will many things that we have adopted to during COVID, these are basically becoming part of our lives, and this is something that we need to adopt to. And whether we have to talk about health or education or the economic stimulus, in either case, there needs to be a very inclusive strategy, where we need to have a sort of a public-private dialogue. The government needs to engage with the community, and they need to hear directly from the community what are their needs, what are their challenges, and what they actually need.
So,
No issue.
Ahad, can I move on or to your
Yes.
to
Yes.
the next question? Uh,
Yes, please.
so, yeah. So, in your opinion, again, what role do you think Asian think tanks are playing in the or should play in the post-pandemic recovery?
Yes, I think if we can just divide the working of a think tank into three components, that is action research, advocacy and outreach, and capacity building. I think they have a role in all three of these components. So while I think it is almost requisite for a think tank to give out evidence-based research. So in SDPI, we came up with around 20 good policy briefs, and we were regularly advising the government on several issues. And one of the issues I think I missed out earlier was the food security issue. Because of the transportation, because there was a problem with the supply chain, and and we have been advising the government, and we have also set up a food security dashboard with the government in that regard. With regards to the advocacy and outreach component, I think I'll reiterate the concept that I've been saying I've been advocating for the last 10 odd minutes. This is the public-private dialogue. There is a need for the government to directly engage with the community at all levels, and I think the think tanks are the probable modes where they can bridge the gap between the government and the community, and this is something that SDPI did. We completed a project just a few days back, and that was on basically the Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative. And we have been advocating how the business regulatory environment in Pakistan should become better, should have less distortions, less duplications, and this is something that basically the government started taking seriously as well during the COVID. And the third part, the capacity building part, I think this is very important as well, and SDPI has been involved in that as well. So, for example, I myself conducted a workshop for the alternate business models for women entrepreneurs that have been working, and and those who were struggling during COVID. So we conducted that workshop, and we helped them create alternate business models that were dependent on e-commerce and of course the tech sector. And this actually gave us a very good feedback, and some of them have actually started to make up for the losses they had in the earlier 3 to 4 months during the first wave. And last, I think with regards to outreach, we as think tanks, we need to make sure that only the required information gets out. There is a lot of noise due to social media. There is a lot of noise in normal conversations of people, and we need to ensure that we have communication strategies with the government that only calls for the right information to reach to the community. That's all, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ahad. Now I'm moving on to Anand Lobo. Anand Lobo represents an organization called SEVAK in the community. He's the secretary and the chief executive officer. SEVAK is a voluntary organization which works to promote and protect child rights, women empowerment, community health, livelihood promotion, and disaster management. And when I speak of disaster management, I requested Anand to actually focus on how COVID-19 has affected the lives of children, especially with reference to COVID-19. What is it SEVAK is doing? Because I thought we should bring in some community voice to look at, as we at the Public Affairs Center always say, have a bottom-top approach. Probably we believe that that's where some solutions will come, because ultimately we are talking about human development. So in that case, I had requested him to please join us for this. And Anand, over to you. If you could please give us an overview of the COVID-19 situation, especially with reference to children's education, and how largely it is affecting economic resources.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So SEVAK is working with communities in South India, and particularly in North Karnataka in 5 districts. There's Belagavi, Dharwad, Koppal, Vijayapura, and Bagalkote. And fortunately, we have been partner of PAC for last 10 years with different kind of community-based research projects. And we actually work with children and families. The children are our focal points. That to vulnerable children, they were from the poor families. And because of their poverty, those who are subjected for different kind of exploitation and neglect. COVID-19 pandemic, it a large extent to the people. I mean the poor. And as far as the part is concerned, this effect is concerned, this is to social and economic lives. As the poor we see among families of agriculture laborers, when you work in the village setup and rural setup, we see agriculture laborers. One. Second thing, that migrants that we could see here, the migrants are outgoing migrants and incoming migrants as well. So outgoing migrants are largely depending on agriculture work, and they're in search of agriculture season. They are going to South Karnataka and the neighboring states like Maharashtra, Goa, and Kerala for construction kind of work. And the incoming migrants that we find it from North India, especially those who come from large construction work, then hotel business and barber shop and spa business, they would come here. That is the thing. Now, due to COVID, these migrant workers and the agriculture laborers, it very badly, because all of a sudden it has come. All of a sudden, without their expectation, it has come. Now the question has come, and all the people are in hysteria, mass hysteria, that what to do, because people are migrating, people are going back. These also want to go back and come back, but what to do, they do not know that. When we ask the people, why are you going, they don't have answer. But everybody is going, everybody's life is at stake, that so they are going that. The people have gone and people have come. That's happened now. People have gone, they have not come up, but they don't have any job there. Wherever they gone back, they don't have any job. They are at home. Here in our area, we see that these barber shops are closed here. So those who have come from outside with all fantastic things they brought here, they have been closed. Large construction, railway over bridges and such a large construction where people usually come from Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and they are not there now. Today, the work is stopped now. And the hotel business is also very hit up, because they usually come from Northeast India and Delhi, there's no hotel business has also been hit now. Now, the agriculture migrant workers gone back and they come back here. Now they are engaged in their own land. So the local, those who stay here and engage in their field, they also don't have any work. Okay, government has done many things here. We can't say that government has not done anything. As far as social security is concerned, government has done a lot of things, especially providing PDS and other social security measures, but it has not reached everybody, and everybody is got it. So other institutions like us, we have helped it with some CSR funds, some foreign funding and all. We could also reach there. SEVAC itself has reached about 6,000 families with 2-3 months ration and other groceries as concerned. We saw when we went to the villages, we saw people eating rice and chili powder. We saw in our bare eyes that this one. And malnutrition and they are in confusion. We would see that the men communities drinking and roaming around, and women usually any pandemic, any victimization, the women and children are first and very hardly hit. This could be seen very conspicuously. So, as far as children are concerned, that we see that schools are closed. So schools are free for children, and you know that RTE is in place. But anyhow, 75-85% children were in the school. But when the school is closed, the children are at home. We see that when the child is out of school, is out of the safety net. That's the one problem there. And here in India, we have 24% of children getting married among girl children and 10% among men children. So now the children, girl children, grown up girl children are a matter of concern for the parents. That's the main thing that. So child marriages are seen very rampantly here, but they are not reported. That's our problem. We found now early married girls, so many early married girls, but they are not reported just because the government has their own systems that the moment that they get marriage, people know that age for the marriage age for the girls and marriage age for the boys is 18 and 21. The moment that they get married, their age is manipulated and it is written wrongly and recorded wrongly. So they don't get have data among the government. There's a child marriage as such. So this is the one problem. Second thing. Children are out of school, so they have lost. This is now more than 1 year. The children are out of school, so they lost interest in studies. And all the migrant workers and youth and perpetrators are here, and these are also a prey for abusers, different kind of abusers, including sexual abusers and trafficking. Then abject poverty among the parents, and they have to go out and to get some kind of job, but children are their primary concern, so they have to settle their young children. So again, the child marriage and other forms of abuse is on children. People having land holding are migrated back home, and they are engaged in cultivation, and the local people are also not in job. Trafficking in the form of marriages, domestic help increases. The boys who need to go outside, they also are concerned, so they get married and taking their spouses. Though these parents see.
Anand, if I could just step in for a moment. All things what you've stated is very good, but have they increased during COVID-19? Or have they, because these are all social problems we have in India. We know that, child marriage, abuse, everything. But how has this affected, has it increased during COVID-19? Because if you're talking about setting an agenda for post-COVID-19 recovery, which is what our topic is, I just wanted to know, have they increased in the community?
This is increased due to COVID, yes. Due to COVID, that is increased, but that has been not recorded or documented properly as it is. But because of the COVID, because the parents are much concerned about this and of their young children, so this has been increased. Child marriage, child labor, child trafficking, this has been increased.
Right. Okay. So I'm before we have another 20 minutes, I think 20 or 25. Before I go back to the speakers and the panelists, I would like to ask from the audience if you all have any questions. We can either let you in or you can type the questions. You can put it in the chat. I think Enrique has got a question. Any of you all can answer. Do you think that think tanks have emerged more or less capable to influencing the agenda for recovery after a year of pandemic? Karin, would you like to take that? And then probably I go around to Ahad also. And then from India we can.
Sure. Well, one of the things that, okay, so this is not, researched or anything like that but just by observing what I have seen that has happened, there has been so much more activity, visible activity amongst the think tanks of the South since the COVID-19 began. Maybe it is because things went digital and there was more presence online, so there was more space for these think tanks to also voice their opinions. This is not only in these global discussions, because otherwise global discussions you have to travel to, and that then becomes so restrictive in the way that think tanks got to engage, but also within the national context. There was so much more airing of opinions. There was so much, in the beginning, I think there was this complete, nobody knew what was happening, there was no data. But then after about a month or two, there was really this felt need for think tanks to really go out there and try and, even if they couldn't go out there physically, it felt as if they were really trying to get a hold of the situation. And I really do think that there was an increased momentum of the think tanks trying to gauge, trying to provide some sort of meaningful or even insights into what was taking place. And I do feel that there was more reliance on the local think tanks, more so than there was before. Like I had also explained, the opportunities of working with the government, this might also have been the case for other think tanks. But definitely the space that provided for opinions, for new information, for different forms of discussions seems to have improved. In a way, maybe a positive spin-off. Whether what is being said is actually getting fed into policy and whether there is any real outcome of that is a different kind, has to be measured and really looked into. But it seems to be at least that the space has been opened up more broadly.
Okay. Ahad, would you like to add before Anand, or I will add from, because even though we're all from the southern, each of our country has got some different approach to some of these things. Ahad?
Exactly. So I think I'll agree with Karin here. We, of course, I believe when you're part of a think tank that is as old as 27, 28 years, the capability will not drastically improve or decrease with such instances. But I believe that the acceptance in the government space that increased during COVID, and there was demand from the government to do action research, to produce evidence on certain issues, and this at least for the 4 years that I've been part of SDPI, I've never seen before. So this probably was COVID acted as a catalyst for better engagement of the government with independent think tanks.
Okay. Enrique has made a very interesting comment on Anand's sharing. He said that, for example, to comment on something Anand said about children in school, think tanks in Peru have failed to address this agenda at all. And the initiative is 100% with the government. We agree with you, Enrique, and with others recently we brought out the National Education Policy 2020. Unfortunately, it was developed just before the pandemic, but I think a lot of the issues, concerns, recommendations in the NEP directly or indirectly connects to what we have been talking about in terms of malnutrition in children, lack of appropriate pedagogy for education, especially for children in the rural areas. Secondly, how has the government tackled even something as simple as increasing the knowledge of a teacher by capacity building activities in the rural areas? There's nothing. There's zilch. All the more it would have been useful, it was there, because so much of technology has come in and many of the children don't even have electricity in their home, even if they have to go online. Yeah. NDK has also added that also in other areas, government has the initiative to set the agenda. This is what NDK has written. Anand, would you like to add something before I move on to the other audience? If
as far as education of children is concerned, we know that it is a mafia in India. You know that there is a private schools and there is international schools and there is government school which has been neglected. But we have also an example, best examples in India, that is in New Delhi. Yeah. Delhi government, what they have done it. So that is a good example for all of them, because now we could see that 100% enrollment of children in the school, and they cater all the needs of the children, not only education, the nutrition, food, sports, physical, emotional, everything. And children from LKG to 12 standards are kept in a single school, and they are catered the quality education. Now, I had an opportunity to go there and to study the system in Delhi education system, and I happened to go to one of the slums and ask them that how is it been done. Then they were saying that earlier teachers used to come to slum to take the children to the school, and children used to run away from them. Now the thing has come that at 7 o'clock in the night we go to the school to get our children back, but children escape from us and then run. This is the system that they have developed it, and there's a sports complex, there is nutrition, there is food, and their midday meal is some sumptuous food, and cleanliness, everything is there. That can be replicated in any country, and in India that could be replicated, and most of the education policies influenced by that kind of education we have. Now recently we have seen that the children from private schools are re-enrolled to government schools because of the result and the quality of education they give that. And Delhi education system is really a lesson and model for others as well.
Okay.
It might be a small state, but it is a small state and having not more rural areas, but it is a model for others.
Yeah. Karin, do you want to say something? Because there's a very nice question that NGK has asked. Or you want to add something, Karin? I thought you wanted to speak.
Well, I mean, I think the idea that the larger focus on education and the fact that actually, although most of us were really working on education and we were talking about digital, we knew this was coming, right? That the world was going to take on a more digital space, but that we were really not pushing hard enough was a real miss, actually. And also the fact that we think about digitalization as a equalizer. And I think if anything, we are seeing how it's really not. If you don't really have all the infrastructure in place, if your teachers aren't really geared for it, and how much all of the other factors really need to be in place. So there is so much more that needs to be done and so much more advocacy, because going to that digital space can probably allow education to be given more efficiently. Because, you know, this idea that certain schools are so much better than other schools is really not an option, no? If we are really thinking about inequality, and digitalization is one way that can help us get out of that. But we really need to think about all the legs. And COVID came when there were no legs for many places. But I think in the future, this is one area that really needs to be focused on. It should be a development priority.
Right. So the question that Enrique has asked is, do you think that think tanks have emerged more or less capable to influencing the agenda for recovery after a year of pandemic? I would like to just say a small thing over here. Coming from Public Affairs Center, I would answer yes in the positive, because at least the government of Karnataka have started listening to think tanks like us, where we are bringing in the value of data. I think somebody in the beginning in our panel said that the problem with many of these policy decisions or the way the government works is because of lack of appropriate data. You know, they tell us we have 1 lakh data, when actually we look into it, there is nothing. There's not even one person. I think what we are trying to do and work with the government is even going to as basic as collecting data, so that think tanks and civil society and research organizations like us will be able to conduct some sort of an analysis to provide some sort of a probable solution. I have a question for Karin from Shannon. Thanks, Shannon, for coming in. So the question is to you, Karin. Do we have the gender data evidence needed to understand and address the gender gap? And what role can think tanks play in getting this gender data and evidence into the hands of decision makers?
Okay, I presume Shannon is talking about post-COVID issues with employment. As far as I know, there have been, and I'm talking about a couple of studies I know of in South Asia, and I'm sure other countries are doing it as well. There has been an effort to do smaller studies by think tanks to try and understand what happened to men and women during COVID. CEPA, for example, did a very small survey that you can find on our website. I know Learn Asia is another think tank that is doing it in a couple of countries. And it is also something that some of the labor departments had also tried to do because of this idea that women were more badly affected. I don't really know of how widespread this is, but definitely it has also prompted, I believe, a little bit more interest in trying to look at this information in a more disaggregated way. Of course, it certainly is not representative samples unless it is done in a much more broader sense than what I know of. But certainly there has been a little bit more effort to correct it. Let me also just say that this is also where, and I know Shannon, you're also kind of interested in this, where community data, maybe Anand also, this is something that is of interest to you. It's high time we started thinking more creatively about how do we make community data. Public affairs is also very, very much connected with that kind of data. How do we make that way more a valid form of information collection? And again, with so much more access to apps and tools that can help us do this, why don't we use it, in a more organized, formalized way? And hopefully this is also now going to be a next trend.
Shannon has another question. What role can think tanks play in getting this gender data and evidence into the hands of decision makers? So I'll just give 2 lines which just came to my mind, and then anyone else can. And one thing that I have learned over the few years of my association is, as think tanks, one of the ways to influence the government is, one, work with them and not for or against them, because they're the only ones who can bring in replicability. The other thing is, as think tanks, it is more important for us to see eye to eye, that is, things together, see it with one lens, as Karin had suggested earlier, rather than looking at it from different points of view, see how collectively we can come together to address one issue. I believe if we do that as a consortium, as a team, the government is probably ready to listen to us. This is what I have always felt. Would anyone else like to add to this? Because we have exactly another 6 minutes left.
Enrique, I think the initiatives that the government takes without evidence inclusive. So in order to ensure that the reaches the community, the full benefit reaches the community, and of course we have talked about inequality here. The only way is to ensure that we have evidence-backed decision making, and that's where the role of the think tanks come in. Whether we're talking about gender, education, or any other aspect of the community. I think the point is that I think with COVID as a catalyst, the government seemed to have understood the need for evidence, and this I personally take as a big positive in this scenario. Thank you.
Okay, what I can see is that the mindset. What the mindset and perspective of the bureaucrats is changed from earlier. Now they are very open. Second thing, there are also gender balance in the bureaucracy in India. So they are open to all these things for education, child education, women issues, and gender issues. So this is not very difficult for us to convince or to provide with evidence, with right evidence and documents. So definitely that can be influenced on them.
Who is setting the agenda for post-COVID-19 recovery? Who do you think is setting? Anyone can answer from the audience or from the panelists. Who do you think is setting the agenda for the post-COVID-19 recovery?
Well, I don't really know. I would say it's nature, because they have unleashed this on us. But I think I'm not really sure. It's still the balance has still shifted. I would say that the global, I mean, you know, the same power imbalances still do exist, and the agendas are still. I mean, there are some changes in those major power balances, you know, and those kinds of interplays are still taking place. But there are these small windows of opportunities that always exist for resistance and alternative actions to take place. So I'm not really sure the power balances have really changed. But there have been at least a few more spaces, small spaces for other voices to emerge because of the circumstances we find ourselves in.
Yeah, everybody, the stakeholder issue starts from the community and hub with the government and law enforcement, enforcing agencies, and everybody has to be part and stake in this.
Thank you. Ahad, do you have any point?
Yes, so I'll just comment here that agenda, of course, can be set by anyone, but we need to discuss that agenda are successful, and I think the major success factor is inclusivity. We need to include all stakeholders in dialogues. We need to include all stakeholders, and of course back it up by good and inclusive evidence. This will, and of course, just will like to take just two seconds. There have been very innovative research methodologies that came up during the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
So that is also a positive. With these things, will ensure that we get to a point where successfully recover from this pandemic.
But I think as far as think tanks are concerned, we should play a more effective, active role in being the catalyst between the community and other stakeholders. I take this opportunity to thank Karin Ahad, Anand, and all the participants to be part of this and to engage and make us put on our caps as think tanks. Thank you very much, even to all think tanks and the organizers.